Good morning. Welcome to another Journey Midweek Connection. I'm Carl, the youth pastor here at Journey, and that is my privilege. I'm excited to share with you from the book of Daniel today. But first, I want to talk for just a minute about our habits, about the rhythms in our lives. We are all creatures of habit in one way or another. For example, every morning I wake up, I do the same couple of things, but the first thing I do is I get out of bed, and it's more of a stumble and a roll than anything else. And I head down the stairs, usually with a cat running between my legs, trying to get attention because nobody's paid attention to him all night, and my daughter's still sleeping. So he's trying to get my attention because he wants food, really. It's not because he likes me. Stumble down the stairs, and I make myself a cup of coffee. And I take that cup, and I pour the coffee in, and I pour in creamer. Actually, let's be honest, I like a little bit of coffee in my creamer. Yeah, I'm that guy. But I make that coffee, and then I take the pot and I take the stuff that Mindy needs for her coffee upstairs and set it on the stand by her chair so she can drink it later on in the morning. And just about every single morning, that happens. There are other things that I do. One of the habits that is the most ingrained, the rhythm that's most ingrained into my life's patterns is reading every night before I go to bed. Since I was very young, basically since I learned to read, every night, the last thing I do before I go to bed is I read something. And if I cannot read, like for whatever reason, forgot to charge my Kindle, the power's out and there's no lights, for whatever reason, if I don't read, unless I'm completely exhausted, I can't sleep. It helps my brain slow down. It's a habit I've created. It's something that I do. In Daniel chapter 6, we see the story of Daniel in the lion's den. And this is not a story to encourage us to civil disobedience. This is not something to incite protests against different types of government overreach, although there may be a time and a place for those things. But to talk about the rhythms that Daniel had in his life and his faithfulness to those, even at risk of his losing his life. In Daniel chapter 6, we see the king makes a law and passes the law of the Medes and Persians that no one can pray or worship anyone except him. And in verse 10, now when Daniel learned that the decree that nobody could worship any god except the king had been published, he went home to his upstairs room where the windows opened toward Jerusalem. 3 times a day he got down on his knees and prayed, giving thanks to God. Now, if you stop there, it sounds like Daniel's doing this. He's changing the way he lives his life, kind of in retaliation to the government or as a way to throw it in the face of the king that, hey, I don't worship you, I worship God, and so I'm going to pray 3 times a day. But the next sentence, the next phrase says, just as he had done before. This was nothing new for Daniel. Daniel's rhythm was 3 times a day. He knelt before his window, facing Jerusalem, and he prayed to the God of heaven, saying so many things that we see later in the book of Daniel about saving Israel and redeeming his people. And God, we're waiting for you to work and move and take us out of this exile that we're in for 70 years. It was his habit. It was what he did every day. And it was the rhythm of his life. What habits, what rhythms do you have in your life every day that help bring you closer to God? The very basic ones are some of the best. Spending time in his word, in memorization, in memorizing his word. It really, as much as we say, hey, memorizing gets harder when you get older, it doesn't take long to memorize a few verses of scripture. What about prayer? Do you have a time and a place where you spend time talking to God? I often find that in the mornings here at the church in my office is the best time to engage in prayer because it's quiet. There's not many people around, and I can focus on my thoughts and on what God has to say to me. What about worship? Do you spend time listening to music that praises God and then lifting up your own voice to him? I want to encourage you, church, this week. Think about the rhythms and the patterns and the habits in your life. And what are they drawing you closer to? Are you spending time intentionally getting to know your Creator, getting to know the one who loves you and made you and wants a relationship with you? Have a great week. God bless.